right, because
No, I don't.
yeah. Right. Okay, are we ready? Are we good? Are we streaming?
Looks like it.
Good? Okay. I call the Norton City Council regular council meeting for Monday, June 10th, 2019 to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silent reflection. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Please be seated. Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Here.
Mr. McClone?
Here.
Mr. Carratt?
Mr. Carroll's excused.
Mr. Towsley?
Here.
Ms. Whipke? Here. Mr. Pelot?
Here.
Mr. Kernan?
Here. Communications from the public. Were there any communications from the public? No? Okay. No communications from the public. All right, under Committee of the Whole, reports from standing committees. Are there any reports from the standing committees? And under A, we'll acknowledge receipt of the May 2019 budget reports. Letter B, Summit County Hazard Mitigation Plan. Mr. Towsley?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is something that we renew every 5 years in cooperation with the county. What council has received, I guess, is the first 19 pages, which are what's really pertinent to us. This is what I've received.
Okay.
It's 191 pages, so this is on file with the clerk if anyone wants to see deeper and further.
Well, I'm glad you got it, Mr. Towsley, not me.
The redwood.
In all honesty, I have not had an opportunity to look over the whole
Okay.
thing. But I think we could probably move it forward and make sure we do our due diligence in the meantime.
Sure.
I do have one question that I don't know if the administration might be able to answer or not. On page 9 of the program, it talks about a group that was formed, 31 members with a participant from each community. Was that just then, or is that now? And do we have a member of the committee? Talks about a planning group, so maybe the group was only during the planning?
Through the chair, Mr. Towsley, I will confirm. I do know that there are some committees that the fire chief, police chief sit upon.
Okay.
I'll make sure. There's like what we call the LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee. I don't know that it follows the same thing, but I will
Okay.
find out for you at the
If we
next
have a
meeting.
representative, I'd just like to
Yep.
know who it is.
Yep.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions involving this?
I
Yes.
did have some. I looked it over briefly, what we was given. Maybe Mr. Fowler can answer. Is there anything new from 2014 that would concern the chief of police and the fire chief that would have to be changed from 2014 in all this paperwork that we should know about? I mean, do they need like certain equipment that they didn't need in 2014, or do they need some kind of guidance classes or anything, or is there anything changed that that they did not have in 2014?
I will follow up with the chiefs tomorrow and see what their thoughts are. I've not heard anything from them on this issue.
Okay.
I would, and I would assume they got a copy of this. Okay.
I would just, I don't know if you mentioned it, Mr. Towsley, or not, but we need to get this passed because this also allows us to get emergency grants for doing mitigation and such in the city.
I guess that will bring up a question for me then. Because this covers 2019, are we covered right now or not?
Yeah, I mean, the plan is, I mean, if you read the recitals, and I've not done a lot of independent verification of this, but county is the coordinating agency for FEMA on behalf of its member communities. So to the extent there was a plan that requires updating, that plan would stay in effect until the update is passed and approved. So, I mean, I think we can review all those questions. I think the county's plan is the plan. Likelihoods are not going to really change it because they've probably already adopted it and looking for us to ratify it. I don't like to say it's sort of like a rubber stamp, but I'm not sure there's a lot to deliberate with respect to this plan.
So is there a hurry to get it passed?
I can find out about the deadline, but
Okay.
So we can read it one time tonight and then go from there.
Certainly, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, certainly that.
Okay, any other conversation on this? And with that, I will make a motion to add this to next week's agenda.
To tonight's
Tonight.
agenda.
I mean, I'm sorry, to add Resolution 67, 2019 to tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
There's a motion, there's a,
Can I
mo-
do that?
yeah.
Okay.
There's a motion and a second to add Resolution 67, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter C, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for a contract for observation. We were looking at Medina Line and Johnson Road construction to make sure we get them done correctly this time. At this point, we had added on 76. Now we're taking 76 for Medina Line. Now we're removing it off the agenda before we even get it there. And we're just going to stick with 68, 2019 for Johnson Road. This is for a fee not to exceed $13,903. And actually, they'll be coming out doing some tests. And then on the concrete and such, making sure it's holding up. They'll come out and observe what they've done. They will come out and see, after they get done, they will come out and do an examination and submit any issues that there might be with the road. And then the company will have a chance to go back and take care of those deficiencies. And then they will come back out and look at it again and make sure that those deficiencies have been taken care of and nothing else to go. Do we have a time issue on this?
No. I would just ask that it be passed before you go on break so that we can award the contract.
And it's called the Johnson Road Intersection Project. Does that mean it's going to go from one intersection to the next?
No. So Mr. Hess and Mr. Slago went out to Johnson Road and they measured essentially the area that we want. So essentially it goes from just east of Mamie to almost to the intersection. It's not quite it's not the full length. It's about half. It's really where the road is in disrepair, where it's in the most disrepair. Okay. There may be a couple small sections west of there that won't be able to be addressed, but for the most part, it's. If you just give me 1 second, I'll get you the. Trying to pull it up here. Belton to Mamie essentially is around the parameters. Okay.
So it's going to come down to Hametown then? Or are we
Almost. Belton is the first street there by the service department garage.
Right.
So we're going to go just east of there. There's a section that is really in disrepair there. So they're taking out the worst sections of the road and going west.
And part of the idea here is with doing this is to, again, continue to try and fix these roads right the first time so they don't continue to deteriorate and we don't continue to waste money on pavement.
So will
part
we
of
see-
this would be a full, like a depth, our crews did a full depth reclamation out there where we had some failures. They're gonna grind, do any repairs necessary, and then we'll top it with blacktop and make sure that it's of a sufficient size for that street. The problem we have is motor pave is good on residential streets where there's not a lot of traffic. Unfortunately, Johnson Road, you all know, I'm telling you things you know, is a high-traffic street that didn't hold up to that type of material.
Okay.
So we'll be seeing a lot more of these observation contracts in the future.
My intent is anytime we're doing pavement, we're going to pay someone to be there to watch it on our behalf, to check the temperature of the asphalt, to make sure it's installed with our specifications. Without having someone there, no, please don't, this is no disrespect to our crew. They don't have the expertise necessary to do it. And that's why we need someone who understands construction methods and the ODOT specifications to make sure that they're met.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments? If not, I motion to add ordinance 68, 2019 to tonight's agenda for a first reading.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinance 68, 2019 to tonight's agenda for a first reading. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter D, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for legislation for Medina Line Road, the ODOT project for the resurfacing approved funding. Okay, well, this is what we were looking at the other. Are we still going forward with this, or is this wrapped up?
Mr. Fowler.
So this legislation is a little bit different than what you normally see. We sent Larry Hess, Mr. Hess went through some training. So now we can do ODOT projects in-house. This legislation will allow us to bid the Medina line, and then we, the city, gets to choose the lowest and best bidder. Where this would have been practical was probably about 6 months ago, but I will leave that up for your interpretation as to what that means. But we now have the ability to bid these projects in-house and make sure that we pick the lowest and best bidder. Sorry.
And that we would still get the funding. Do we? We've already been funded for this, haven't we?
I'll just go into that. That was one of the things I had for my report, but I'll just kind of go into that situation at this point. Today we were notified. We had a conversation with AMATS and ODOT regarding this project. One of the issues in 2013, we applied for funding for this project. When we applied for that funding, we said we would do Greenwich Road to Eastern. We asked ODOT and AMATS to split the project in half. We were under the assumption that that was going to be acceptable. We were notified today that we need to do the whole project. Because of the extent and the amount of money for that project, we had to come up with an extra $200,000, which we don't have this year. It is my recommendation we continue with this legislation as it is, and then come January, we will bid Medina Line separate, but it'll be part of our annual paving project. We'll just have to punt it 6 months so we can budget the $200,000 to make the project happen. And we would go from Greenwich Road to Eastern at that point. Because we had discussed cutting it from Greenwich to Johnson and then coming back next year and doing Johnson to Eastern. But AMATS will not allow us to do that. Okay.
So are we moving forward? We need to move forward with this anyway?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
Yeah, I've got a little confusion on that. So that means the project's put off till next year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, and maybe this was discussed and I missed it, but we talked about observation of Medina Line and Johnson
So
not doing
the,
Medina.
before that.
yeah, we just took a
Johnson
Medina.
now.
That is just Johnson. Yes, sir. I took the observation of Medina Line off the agenda because of the notification we received today from AMATS.
Okay.
Would the percentage on this still be that the county's picking up, what, 80%?
So the grant amount is for somewhere 385, 395, somewhere in there. They'll still give us that grant amount, but our portion is for the whole. It's for the whole road. So whatever amount that roughly 400,000 covers, we're obligated to cover the remainder. The engineer's estimate has that number to be an additional 400,000. And you're going to say, well, wait a minute, you said 200,000. Well, we have $200,000 in permissive tax fees that are available for expenditure. Medina Line is a permissive tax street. We have earmarked that $200,000 for that portion of the project. I will come up with another 200,000 in 2020 to recover the remaining costs associated with that project. So the estimate's about 800,000 for the total from Greenwich Road to Medina Line.
No way of working it out where we basically go through with it yet this year, and where payment wouldn't be due until either at the very end of the year or early next year?
We discussed that. We discussed it. We have to front the money is what it comes down to, and I'm just concerned with that right now. Unfortunately, I'd rather punt it. I'd rather just wait. We'll hold it off. We'll do it all at one time next year. We'll bid it with our regular street paving. We're going to do Worcester Road at the same time, so we're going to get some mass quantity discounts based on that. That's my hope.
Where and does Wadsworth come into this equation?
That's a very good question, Mr. Towsley. Thank you for asking. So apparently there's an agreement, and I chuckle because we've had disagreements with the county engineer from Medina, Mr. Conrad, and I had spoken on the phone, and he's none too pleased that this is not going forward this year. Apparently, Summit County, Norton, Medina County have an agreement. So Norton is responsible for both sides of the street from Greenwich to Eastern. Medina County goes from Greenwich to Hemphill. Summit County goes from Hemphill to Route 18. So essentially they cut the road in three.
So who makes those agreements?
That's quite the question, but it's something to discuss. One of the issues we have, Medina County is actually in ODOT District 3, or whatever. Say that's 3 or 4. We're in one and they're in another. Our MPO, which is the AMATS, we're in AMATS. Medina County is in NOACA. So we're crossing multiple bureaucracies. Mm-hmm. And so I think one of the reasons that NOACA and ODOT Districts 3 and 4 and AMATS agreed to this structure was because really half the roads in NOACA's district, half of the roads in AMATS district, and this was a way to kind of section the road off. I don't know that answer. I'll look that up. But we have a maintenance agreement that we cover that half. And if you look at it, they take care of the northern, they plow Medina Line from Greenwich to Hemphill. So we're not responsible for that. So, but where the county engineer in Medina is frustrated is he's been promised since 2013 that this would be done, and it hasn't been. So I understand his frustration.
And then Wadsworth plays no part right
and
now.
I'm sorry, that's what I went to tell you.
And the funding we're receiving, is that AMATS?
Yes.
Or ODOT or both?
It's AMATS funding, which is ODOT, right? ODOT, AMATS. It's federal highway money is what it comes down to.
And that sounds like right now it's about 50%.
Yes.
Isn't that lower
Normally
than
it's
usual?
80-20.
Right. That's
But
what I'm getting at.
apparently when we applied in 2013, again, I wasn't here, so it was tried to split it out, and the way it was presented was in order to get the funding, you had to do it all, which is what we fell into today because ODOT all along has said we could split it out. They had a progress meeting at which they discussed we're going to split it out because doing it under an ODOT project, it's actually more expensive because the specs are a little bit different than what we would use locally. And our thought was we could save money by doing it ourselves, the other half. Well, they wouldn't let us do that. Again, we got the phone call about 2 o'clock today.
Okay. I'm just trying to make sure that the Norton residents are getting their fair share of funding from Summit County.
Well, I mean, AMAT's taking, we got money for Medina Line and Worcester Road next year. So, I mean, we've comparatively,
Okay.
if you, and remember, they did fund a lot of Cleveland-Massillon Road. I mean, we're just trying to identify those projects that would fund, what we could find to be successful at grant applications.
So this one can go for 3 readings as well?
Yes.
At this time, I motion to add ordinance 69, 2019 to tonight's agenda.
I'll second.
Motion is second to add ordinance 69, 2019
Any emergency or?
It's like, yes, it has an emergency language in it.
Ordinance 69, 2019 to tonight's agenda. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter E, Eastern Road easements. That falls to me. It's ordinance 70, 2019. If, Mr. Fowler, if you could just update.
Yeah, real quick, we do have a contract, we have a contract on your agenda for Eastern Road Waterline. We have to acquire 5 easements. OIG is the property. They have 3 parcels that'll be crossed by this water line. They have granted us those easements. What you have before you are those 2. I'm in the process of acquiring 2 more, one for Circle K and one Dollar General. But those are 3 easements that we need to construct the water line for Eastern Road.
And this is just for $1 our easement?
Yes.
And that's for all 3 of them?
Yes. I think they might be $1 a piece, but
Well, $3 at the
$3.
most.
Yeah,
That's
we're
really good.
And other good and valuable consideration.
Right.
That's lawyer speak. I remember that from law school. All right.
Could I just ask before you move, who is OIG?
they're a company based out of Akron. They own that property. They have several other property holdings in the area, but that is their largest. They also own about 4.7 acres or 4.5 acres right there at the corner as well.
Where the big factory looking
Yeah, where
thing is?
it's a 47,000 square foot building there. Yes.
Right.
Any further discussion? Right, hearing none, I will move to add ordinance 70, 2019 to tonight's agenda for first reading, okay?
I'll say.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to add to add ordinance 70, 2019 to tonight's agenda. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Towesley.
I thought
That's one short.
okay. Letter F, Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is a contract for the Eastern Road water line not to exceed $589,730 with the HSH Construction of Wadsworth. As I understand it, this is actually $140,000 under the estimate put forth by the engineer. And we can't really award this before July 1st, so we're just going to have looking for a first reading. The Engineering Associates, aren't they the ones doing the observation on this project, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And again, the source of the funds.
OPWC.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion?
I motion to add ordinance 71, 2019 to tonight's agenda with the emergency language for the first reading.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinance 71, 2019 to tonight's agenda. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter G, Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. This is ordinance here to change age limit for original appointment for division police to be 40 years of age or older. Just
Yeah,
anything?
currently the state law says that 35 years or younger is the appointment age for original appointments to a civil service position, but it does provide for municipalities to pass an ordinance to create a different age limit, and the chief of police is recommending this change in order to give them some more flexibility to find full-time officers in civil service positions.
Anyone else have anything up here for that?
It is 40 and younger.
Yeah, under 40. You shouldn't have
Did I say
reached
it?
your 40th
I think you said
birthday.
40
you
and
said
older,
it.
but yeah,
Oh,
just
It does
just-
say on
yeah.
Exhibit A, 40 years of age or older. So,
Yeah, it says it's written in the negative, so it says
Okay,
no person
all right.
can be hired at
Okay.
older than 40, you can't
Gotcha.
be hired. Yeah,
Okay.
and lawyers.
alrighty. If no one else has anything, I'd like to put ordinance 72, 2019 on tonight's agenda for its first reading.
I'll second.
Motion and second to add ordinance 72, 2019 to tonight's agenda. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter H, Mr. Karen's not here, so Mr. Pelot?
This ordinance has to do with sign replacement on 585. This is given administration, transportation authority to go ahead and enter into a contract with ODOT for that sign replacement, and that is to no cost to the city. There'll be ODOT will pick up that entire cost 100%. So we get new signs at no cost to us. It's a win-win.
Are these all new signs, or does those just have to do with that thing that they were putting out there?
No, this is new signage. So remember, 585 is set to be paved next year as well. So prior to the paving, they're going to do all new signage. We should get all new signage on Cleveland Maslin Road as well when they're done. Like, that should all be part of the project.
And is there any timeline on this?
No, I think we have time before break.
Okay. Any other questions? Hearing none, then I will move to add ordinance 73, 2019 to tonight's agenda with emergency.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinance 73, 2019 to tonight's agenda for its first reading. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter I, Ms. Whipke?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is for the new park assessments. And those are going to be assessed less than 25% of the project cost. That didn't we come up with something like $1,180,000 for that or something? The estimate.
Actually the project estimate is like 1.3, but we have, just for council's edification, we're waiting to hear if we receive some more grant money. That was one thing I was going to tell you, that this assessment amount we expect to go down due to some other grant fundings that we're procuring for this project. This is the most that we would be able to assess, but we anticipate that money would be less based on the bids we receive and the amount of grant funding we can get. So the county has intervened on our behalf, and they have been actively lobbying, might be a good word, other entities to help us fund this project to make sure that we get our improvements.
And this is basically for the roads and then to mitigate some of the flooding in the area, correct?
A little bit of stormwater work, a lot of road work. We're going to raise the road 5-6 inches, and then new storm sewers, et cetera.
And there is I believe there's already sewer and water there available.
Yes.
So this is strictly for the roads, which at first I was kind of upset thinking, okay, our citizens had to pay 41%, but that was for sewer, not roads. That's why I wanted to clarify that. Anyone else? Okay. With that, I make a motion to add ordinance 74, 2019 to tonight's agenda with emergency language for the first reading. Can we go to 3 readings?
Yeah, I'm okay with 3 reads, yeah. Preferred for something like for resolution necessity, prefer 3 reads.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to add ordinance 74, 2019 to tonight's agenda for a first reading. Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Letter J, junk car ordinance moves to me. That's ordinance 75, 2019. This is an update of our, for lack of a better term, junk motor vehicle ordinance. I think basically what it does, 2 things. It makes it a little bit easier to cite junk cars that are sitting in people's yards. There's 4 criteria in the old law. All 4 were required to be met before. Now it'll be 2. And it also allows, rather than before it had to be the Director of Public Safety who took care of it, it allows either the Director of Public Safety or his or her designee to do that. So it builds in a little more ability to get these things cited and get them done. Did I state that correctly, Mr. Markey?
Yes. Yeah, other neighboring communities have a little bit less stringent standards. They're using that 2 out of the 4 requirement, so we're mirroring what other communities are doing.
And just so that people know, those 4 criteria are that the car is 3 years old or older, it's extensively damaged, such damage including but not limited to any of the following: missing wheels, tires, motor, or transmission, that it's apparently inoperable, and number 4 is having a fair market value of $1,500 or less. I know one of the complaints that I get most often from residents is junk cars sitting in people's yards. That's the one I get most often, so I think this would be a big help. Any other discussion?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Actually, it's a question on what happens on somebody we've already sent letters to that they violated what they have in their yard currently.
So we will not, this is how I'm going to address that. So we will not change the way we enforce the current letters. So there's been a couple, I'm sure you all are aware. There are a couple residents, one on Hemp Hill, a couple other places, that we've been dealing with this very situation. We will use the 4 criteria on those residents. We will not invoke this new criteria until it's passed. And once it's passed, then going forward, every notification sent forward will be based on the new ordinance.
Okay, because I know one specifically they've just ignored it altogether.
Right.
So that shouldn't even be a problem now. As soon as this is passed,
We'll
can
send them a
mail
new notification of the new ordinance, and then we'll follow the new ordinance based on it.
Thank you.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes, thank you. I've read through this quite a bit, and I've seen just a few questions. In section G on page 83, it states, the notice shall state the motor vehicle will be declared a nuisance and disposed of if it is not claimed within 10 days. Okay, first of all, who will keep the records of the notification dates and expiration dates of the 10-day notices? And who will follow up with removal of the vehicles, such as reminders to the responsible person at the city? I think that would be you, Justin. Who in the city exactly? I mean, what department or what person in the city will be responsible for keeping all these records? And I hope there's not very many, but in keeping the records, and when they've been given a 10-day notice, who will say at the end of that 10 days, okay, 10 days is up, Mr. Jones has received the 10-day notice. And so who will somebody actually have that in a computer program someplace that says?
Well, I don't know if they'll have a computer program, but the chief of police is required to send those notices. And I'm sure when he sends notices, we're going to, administration within the city, the zoning inspector, the administrative officer is going to know about it, right? And at the expiration of the 10 days, then it will be authorized. I don't know who's keeping an Outlook calendar that actually.
Well, that's what I'm
targets the
saying.
date.
Somebody.
Just like to give you an example, we recently mutually agreed with a property owner to remove a vehicle. Now, part of the problem is the police chief under this ordinance has to do a record search, get a new title, etc. And sometimes that takes longer than 10 days. And we have a situation where there's one in particular that's it's taken a little bit longer. So, but once that 10 days has expired, we have that flexibility, and the chief starts that process. It's not always just 10 days, but I can just tell you that there's been a couple experiences where the title in and of itself has taken a little bit longer than the 10 days to get.
But it's a 10-day window.
But it's a minimum of 10 days. Yeah, I mean, it's a 10-day just to allow us then to start that process.
The only reason I'm asking that is when we do get complaints on junk cars and vehicles and stuff, it's a person that normally has complained several times. And now we can say to them, okay, we gave a 10-day notice, and that 10-day notice expires on such and such a date. And I just wondered who would be responsible for looking at that date. And then if anybody calls in again and asks again, I hope we wouldn't say, well, nobody's looked at that in the last 3 or 4 days, you know.
We do that now. I mean, like when we go out for high grass or any complaint we might receive, we put it on, we serve notice, and then we log it, for lack of a better term, time tickler that tells us, hey, it's time for this notice. And then we go back out. Perfect example, the corner store. We all know that we had a trash problem there. They tore down the building. Again, we gave them a 10-day notice to clean up. Now, they got it cleaned up. You can argue whether or not it's successful, but I think it looks a lot better than it did. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's similar. We'll give them the same notice. We want to work with the property owner to try to get it resolved so we don't have to intervene. That's what our ultimate goal is.
Okay, just a couple more things if I could. We talk about storing them. First of all, number one, no matter who tows them, where are they going to be stored? Are they going to be stored on a piece of city property, or is the same towing company always going to have? Are they always going to be the same company that picks them up, and are they going to take them to their lot?
No, they take them to the city garage.
Okay, go ahead.
We already do this. We pick them up, we take them to city garage.
Okay.
And then the police chief has to go through his title search and do all that work before anything else can happen. Now, we have a contract with a towing company that has a contract with the city. Excuse me. And part of that contract requires them to tow vehicles on our behalf, too.
Okay, so that covers where they're being stored. And I also wanted to know, if we could, what cost are we charging? You know, there's going to be a point when they're saying, I want to pick up my vehicle. Is it going to be just the cost of what the towing company charged us to tow it to our city lot? And then are we charging the person who owns the vehicle for storing at our city lot so many days? Like you said, the chief will be taking care of his end.
We typically charge an abatement, nuisance abatement, because it's going to be under the nuisance statute. We would charge them a nuisance abatement charge, and they would pay that before they.
You mean, I'm sorry, before for the towing and nuisance?
Yeah, it'd all be lumped under a nuisance abatement charge, and we would just charge them a flat amount.
Because
it would cover all our costs.
Because I don't see any reference to amounts in here, and I just wondered if we had an amount already determined someplace.
No, because I think each situation's different. I mean, if you have to have a flatbed because a car's disabled and doesn't have a wheel versus a tow truck, you know, I don't think you want to, at least personally, I don't think we want to set a.
No.
If we want to say a minimum, I'm okay with that. But I don't think we want to set forth a standard that says this is the price that you pay, because I think we need to be a little flexible in what we're.
All right, and if you look at page 84, section J, it states certain things.
Excuse
you can
me,
read them yourself.
Mr. Gaynor. Mr. Gaynor, could I explain that the page number you're referencing is in the top left corner?
Yeah.
It's page
top
84.
Left corner of the.
It's probably under your binder clip, Robert. Page 84 of 138.
123. And it goes into time periods and stuff. My question, if you read that, is how long does the owner have, like, once his car is towed and it's, let me see if I can state this right. Once he has claimed, he didn't claim it and it was sold, say, or disposed of, they say, how much does he have, how much time does he have to demand the excess amount that was left over? Like, if we tow his vehicle in here and we dispose of it, and there's only, say, $800 owed on this total bill, and we dispose of it and we get $1,000 out of it. It says here that he has, if you'll read how long, it doesn't say exactly how long he has to, it says he has a right to demand the excess amount that was received by the city for his vehicle. But it doesn't say how long, because how long do we have to wait before we return that to our general fund or wherever it's going to go? How long do we have to let the owner of that vehicle, does he have a year or 6 months or 90 days or what to ask for his excess amount that we received for his vehicle? You understand what I'm asking, Robert?
I think it's something that we're going to have to look at, make sure we're not in conflict with the code, because it cites the higher votes code here. So I'm going to assume that that's in the statute.
Yeah, there is some
Reference.
contradictions there is what I was getting at. And also G and J are contradictory on time given to claim the vehicle. If you notice the time given to claim it, on one of them it's one amount of time, and on the other one is another amount.
Probably all good questions to
Well,
receive
I mean,
before the meeting, or after the meeting, we can work through any discrepancies we find. We're going to have to talk to the police chief and who administers this and sort of work through it.
That's all I had anyway.
Yeah, it's tough to answer the questions on the spot.
I agree. I didn't expect an answer right off.
Okay.
Further discussion? All right, I move to add ordinance 75, 2019 to tonight's agenda for its first reading.
I'll second.
All right, and we will look into all those other issues. We're just going to do a first reading tonight. So would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Kernan?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. President, before we move on,
Public hearing?
on ordinance 74, the new park assessment, agenda shows ordinance, the actual piece of legislation shows it as a resolution.
Yeah, it's a resolution.
It should be resolutions.
Yeah.
So it should be resolution 74. And that's what it says on the actual legislation.
Yeah,
It's
the legislation's, the revised code requires it to be a resolution.
So
They
we're
call it a
good.
resolution of necessity, so it is a resolution.
I should have called it a resolution instead of an ordinance.
That's okay. Before we move out of Committee of the Whole, is there anything else to come before Committee of the Whole? Right, consideration of the minutes of the regular council meeting of May 20th, 2019. Is there any additions, deletions, or corrections to those? Those will be accepted as submitted. We're going to come back to reports from officers, boards, and commissions and move on to public hearings. So at this time, I now declare the public hearing convened on ordinance number 57, 2019. Ordinance number 57, 2019 is an ordinance rezoning property described as permanent parcel numbers 46-06218 and 46-06219 from a B2 district to a B3 district. Would the clerk please certify the legal notice was published in the Norton Post on May 25th, 2019?
I hereby certify that the legal notice for this public hearing was published in the Norton Post on May 25th, 2019, and that notices to all of the contiguous property owners were mailed on May 21st, 2019.
Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said rezoning? Please give your name and address to the stenographer.
Good evening. I guess this must not be, is it on?
Yes, it is.
Great news. We have a new business coming to.
Your name and address.
Oh, I'm sorry. God, I don't have my glasses on. Does it say that? Tim Crawford. I live at 3990 South Cleveland Maslin Road. And in fact, I live on parcel 4608689 and also own parcel 688, which is adjacent to this property. And as I started off, good news. We have a new business coming to town. And like to state that I am and my wife are both fully in favor of the change of this zoning and welcoming this new business. The Kuhn property, which is located at the 420 South Cleveland Maslin Road, and the parcels have been already posted. Jim Kuhn bought the property in 1992. November of 1992, and he's been a very welcome addition to the neighborhood. In one sense, it is a disappointment to see that he is moving on in life, or whatever you want to say, and wants to open another chapter or whatever of his life. And I can appreciate where he is coming from. He's been an excellent neighbor, a very good neighbor, one that even my children remarked that what a friendly guy he is. And as I stated, we're sorry to see this move on. But moving on is a good thing. Norton needs to move on. In one sense, I'm not sure why we are here. Holding a public hearing. Other communities, as you know, I've been involved in government for a few years and actually started right here at one of these podiums. But other communities are very open to business and to business change. And if there's one thing that I think that we must do is be more open to the change of business and the business activities going on around us. It's going to become a very costly place to live if we don't. That's all really I have. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. There again, I appreciate each and every one of you, your service. It's hard to find people to be willing to sit in those elected positions and that.
Have your notes for the record?
No, they're. I hate to tell you, they're on the back of another meeting I was at. So, thank you very much, and enjoy seeing all of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Crawford.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said rezoning? Please give your name and address to the stenographer.
Robert Dietz, 645 Swift.
Pull that just down so that we can.
He's a little taller.
Robert Dietz, 645 Swift Road, Kirksey, Kentucky. I'm here to represent the business that's going to be developing on that property. I really don't have anything to add, but I'd be more than glad to answer any questions that the council might have.
We're good.
Good. Thank you. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said rezoning? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. And I'll call it one more time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak for the said rezoning? Is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said rezoning? Please give your name and address to the stenographer. For the second time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said rezoning? For the third and final time, is there anyone who wishes to speak against the said rezoning? I now declare the public hearing closed. We'll move back up to reports from officers, boards, and commissions. Mayor Zita.
Thank you. I just want to kind of quickly announce, just this past last week, Safety Town was had here at the City of Norton for the incoming kindergartners that will be starting school this fall. It turned out to be a nice, quick week, but I know it was a lot of work, and it was quite tiring by the end of the day for each of the people that were here. But once again, we want to thank everybody who participated in that, and I I'm sure that the kids had a great fun. We had graduation for that last on Friday night, and once again that too turned out very well. That was over at the high school auditorium. Then on Saturday, the Norton Alumni Association had their banquet. It's an annual banquet. Scholarships were given to, I believe it was 12 high school students. So that turned out very well as well. And once again, that was in the Commons at the high school. So anyway, just to make you guys aware that at that time during the day, there were a number of people who attended, came back home to Norton, whether they lived here, lived out of state, or wherever, came back home for the Alumni Association. So spent some time around the city, as well as doing a tour through the new high school. So that's kind of where we are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Fowler.
Okay, bear with me. I'll try to go quickly. I'm getting the evil eye across the way. So I just want to give you a couple updates. I know it's hard to believe that there's so much going on in this city. So when you were on break coming in July, I anticipate Cleveland-Massillon Road at the railroad tracks will be closed. I don't have a definitive date. I'm just letting you know that before you go on break, I intend to give you the estimated date of closure, and that way we can publicize that. 2019 paving, you may notice they kind of stopped paving for a while. They had some concrete work to catch up on. It was a subcontractor, kind of held them up. They were supposed to be here today. Of course, the great weather has really not helped us. They are supposed to start tomorrow on Grenfell. You may or may not get a call from residents. I am actually having someone here deliver every week something to the residents who will be impacted, so that they're, like Grenfell received letters on Friday letting people know that the paving would be this week. So we intend to keep that process going. Hopeful that they're out of here next week entirely. Now, I know you're not probably thinking about 2020, but before you go on break in July, I intend to give you the 2020 paving recommendations, so you can look at those over break, come back in August so we can start the budgetary process for 2020 with what we're looking at doing. Cleveland-Massillon Road sewer line at Greenwich. I know we've talked about it. We have it designed. We did get a bid back from Carvo. It was a lot higher than we expected. So we're going to bid that out separately. I anticipate that to go to bid while you're on break. We'll ask you to award that to a separate contractor that'll work in the winter, trying to avoid conflicts with Carvo. The reason we want to get that done is that sewer line from Greenwich Road down to Gardner, we would like to get that replaced before the road is installed. So just Greenwich to, well, no, Cleveland, from Cleveland, on Cleveland-Massillon from Greenwich to Gardner. Lastly, at the next meeting, you'll have a Cleveland-Massillon Road North water and sewer line. The water line goes from the middle school up to actually Mr. Crawford's property, and then a sewer line that goes from the corner up to Mr. Crawford's property. We did get our bids back. We'll be ready to move forward. We'll have a signed petition that's supposed to be in my office tomorrow to move that forward. Just wanted to let you know. New Park Drive will be out to bid soon. We will not be able to award that again until after July 1st. I hope to have that ordinance to you before you go on break. And then lastly, I know Saturday was a long night for many people. The mayor and I, as early as Sunday morning, had conversations prior to some of you emailing us regarding the racetrack. We have been discussing ways to address some of the concerns there, but I just wanted you all to be aware we may be bringing something forward. Honestly, 11:30 is too late. Let's just say what it is. If there was a rock concert in town, we'd expect it to be over by 11. We need to figure out a happy medium for our residents and the business. But we want to be business friendly, but we don't want to be anti-resident. So just wanted you all to be aware. We're trying to figure out a happy medium to try to make at least most of the people happy. We won't make everybody happy, but we're going to try to make most people happy.
Do you have any other timeline on the road paving?
As in 2020 or 2019?
2019, like
Yes.
Mount Vernon, things
Like that should be done next week. The whole thing should be done, buttoned up next week. They got all the concrete work done. They should be getting that done.
Great.
And just so you know, there'll be a few extra streets added because we had extra money left over. And you may have noticed there was some concrete done on streets that weren't on the list. So that concrete, we anticipated that we were going to do certain streets extra based on, having a little bit extra money.
Great.
We're going to spend the $1.1 million.
Thank you. Mr. Messner.
Nothing at this time, thank you.
Mr. Markey.
Nothing this time. Thank you.
Right, moving into introduction of new legislation. Resolution 67, 2019. Mr. Towsley.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer Resolution 67, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
A resolution authorizing the approval and adoption of the Summit County Hazard Mitigation Plan.
And that's just the first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Towsley. Ordinance number 68, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 68, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with DLZ Ohio Incorporated for professional engineering services in connection with the construction management and inspection of the Johnson Road intersection project in an amount not to exceed $13,903.
First reading only.
Thank you, Ms. Whipke. Ordinance number 69, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you. I introduce ordinance 69, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to authorize the administrative officer to enter into an agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation in connection with the South Medina Line Road resurfacing project and declaring an emergency.
First reading only.
Thank you, Ms. Whipke. Ordinance 70, 2019 is mine. I offer ordinance 70, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance authorizing the execution and delivery of a waterline easement agreements for Eastern Road Waterline Extension Project and declaring an emergency.
First reading only on that. Ordinance number 71, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 71, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance accepting the bid of HSH Construction and Excavating Incorporated in an amount not to exceed $589,720 for the Eastern Road Waterline Project and declaring an emergency.
First reading only.
Thank you, Ms. Whipke. Ordinance number 72, 2019. Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 72, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to add section 240.09 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton.
First reading only.
Thank you, Mr. McGlone. Ordinance number 73, 2019. Mr. Pelot.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to offer ordinance 73, 2019 for its first reading and ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance providing consent to the Ohio Department of Transportation regarding the project designated as PID 103277 and declaring an emergency.
And if no, that's first reading only, and if nobody has issue, next regular council meeting, be probably looking to waive the third, just so we don't have everything piling up just before vacation.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Pelot. Resolution 74, 2019. Ms. Whipke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I introduce ordinance 74, 2019 for its first reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
A resolution declaring it necessary to improve New Park Drive in the city by constructing, improving, paving, grading, draining, constructing curbs and driveway aprons, and constructing and installing storm sewer improvements, together with necessary appurtenances thereto, comprising the New Park Drive project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you for getting that correct and calling it a resolution. First reading only.
Thank you, Ms. Whipke. Ordinance number 75, 2019 is mine. I offer ordinance 75, 2019 for its first reading and ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend section 660.07 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio.
And that's also for first reading only. Introduction of prior legislation. Ordinance number 57, 2019 would be Mr. Gaynor.
Yes, I'll offer ordinance 57, 2019 for its second reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance rezoning property described as permanent parcel numbers 4606218 and 4606219 from a B2 district to a B3 district.
Second reading only. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaynor. Ordinance number 58, 2019, Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 58, 2019 for its third reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend sections 258.15 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio.
Yeah, this is an ordinance to, that the employees can enroll in 3 different deferred comps for the city now. I move to adopt.
I'll sec-
I'm sorry.
I was just going to say I second.
Okay. I move to adopt 58, 2019.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 58, 2019. Is there any further discussion? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 59, 2019, Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 59, 2019 for its third reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend section 276.06 of the codified ordinances of the City of Norton, Ohio.
I move to adopt ordinance 59, 2019.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 59, 2019. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, this is 20% veterans credit when they take the test.
Anything further? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Ordinance number 64, 2019, Mr. Gaynor.
Yes. You said 64?
I'm sorry, I don't have my glasses on today.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
I just thought maybe I wasn't seeing them.
I left them at home and I didn't want to go back and get them. Ordinance number 61, 2019.
Okay, I'll
Sorry
offer-
about that.
Offer 61, 2019 for its third reading. Ask the clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance to amend the zoning code of the city to implement the C1 zoning classification.
I'd like to move to approve this, please.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 61, 2019. Is there any further discussion?
This is just to, it's quite a rezoning area, creating a new zone for the entire downtown area, you might as well say, from city limits to city limits in both directions almost.
Anything further? Would the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. You know, I almost made it all the way through the agenda without making a mistake there. Ordinance number 62, 2019. Mr. McGlone.
Thank you, Mr. President. I offer ordinance 62, 2019 for its third reading. Ask clerk to read it, please.
An ordinance determining to establish wage rates for seasonal employees and college interns.
I move to adopt ordinance 62, 2019.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to adopt ordinance number 62, 2019. Is there any further discussion?
Yes, Mr. President, this is just to establish new wage rates for the seasonal employees, which would be $9 at 15, and college interns would be $10 at $14.50 an hour.
Any further discussion? Will the clerk call the roll, please?
Mr. McClone?
Yes.
Ms. Whipke?
Yes.
Mr. Gaynor?
Yes.
Mr. Towesley?
Yes.
Mr. Pelot?
Yes.
Mr. Kernan?
Yes. Public service announcements. Mayor,
I have no public service announcements at this time. Thank you very much.
any other public service announcements? I will just let everyone know that the Summit County Council had adopted a resolution declaring Saturday, June 15th, 2019 as Elder Abuse Awareness Day and encouraging the residents of Summit County to participate in any events and programs offered by the communities, libraries, schools, governments, and private sector organizations that are designed to raise awareness of the abuse of older persons for the executive and declaring an emergency. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Anything further to come before council? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor say aye. Aye. We're adjourned.